National movement. National movement 2. Minto Morley reforms, 1909, Delhi Durbar 1911, World War I and Indian response, Home Rule movement, Lucknow Pact 1916, Morley Minto reforms 1909 or এটাকে গভর্নমেন্ট অফ ইন্ডিয়া অ্যাক্ট বলছে 1909 or ইন্ডিয়ান কাউন্সিল অ্যাক্ট 1909. লর্ড মরলে এটা হচ্ছে সেক্রেটারি অফ স্টেট ফর ইন্ডিয়া ইন লন্ডন, আর লর্ড মিন্টো হচ্ছে ভাইসরয় ইন ইন্ডিয়া অফ ইন্ডিয়া ইন ক্যালকাটা. Background: rising extremism, not good for British rule. Hence, the British wanted to give concession to moderate demands while cracking down on extremism. They also wanted to further divide and rule policy. Further, the divide and rule policy via separate electorate. Curzon's imperialist approach and policies had left the Indian resentful. In 1906, a group of Muslim elites called similar deputations, led by the Aga Khan, made Lord Minto and demand separate electorates for the Muslims. The important provisions of this act were: the number of additional members of the Central Legislative Council was increased from 16 to 60. এটা 60 টোটাল 60 ছিল, তাহলে 69 হলো. Elected members Indian were to be 27. Among the remaining 33 are nominated members, 28 to be the officials British, 5 non-officials Indian. The principle of election to the council was legally recognized. Also, the communal representation was for the first time introduced in the interest of Muslim. This was done through provision of separate electorates for the Muslim. Separate electorates means the representatives of a particular community is elected or voted by the eligible voters belong to the same community only. Thus, the electorate was decided on the basis of class and community. For the provincial council, a provision of 3 categories of member was made: general member elected by district boards and municipalities, special member elected by Bombay Corporation and Bombay University, and member from the chambers of commerce. For the Central Council, 4th category Muslims was added, that is separate electorate of Muslim for the centre. The Legislative Council at the centre and the provinces were to have 4 categories of 60 additional members as follows: ex officio members, Governor General and members of Executive Council 8 plus 1, nominated officials members, government officials who were nominated by the Governor Generals, nominated non-official members nominated by the Governor General but were not government officials Indian, elected members elected by the different categories of the Indians 27 elected members of Central Legislative Council came from 13 general electorate, 6 Jamindar of 6 province, 6 Muslim of 6 province, 2 1 each from Bengal and Bombay Chamber of Commerce. Though it seems that non-officials Indians were at the majority 27 plus 5, but those 5 nominated non-officials favored British. So majority of the British officers was always ensured. The elected members were elected indirectly. The local bodies elected an electoral college who would elect members of the provincial legislative council. These members would in turn elect the members of the central legislative council. The number of the members in provincial legislative council of provinces was raised to. The council were given right to discuss and pass resolution on the budget and all matters of public interest, right to ask supplementary questions and move resolutions on matters related to loans to the local bodies. However, the Viceroy had the power to disallow discussion on the budget. An Indian member, Satyendra Sinha, was appointed for the first time to Viceroy's Executive Council. In Bombay and Madras, the number of members of the Governor's Executive Council was raised from 2 to 4. The practice of appointing Indians to this Executive Council began. 2 Indians were also appointed to the Indian Council, which assisted Secretary of State for India in England. First appointee K.C. Gupta and Syed Hussain Bilgrami. Estimation of 1909 Act made it the Minto Morley reforms never desired to set up a parliamentary form of government in India, but in the introduction of the electoral principle for legislative council laid the groundwork for a parliamentary system. The act did increase Indian participation in the legislative council, especially at the provincial level. First World War and nationalist response. In the First World War 1914-1919, Britain allied with France, Russia, USA, Italy and Japan against Germany, Austria, Hungary and Ottoman. The nationalist response to the British participation in the war was threefold. The moderates supported the empire in the war as a matter of duty. The extremists, including Tilak, who was released in June 1914, supported the war efforts in mistaken belief that the Britain would repay India's loyalty with gratitude in the form of self-government. The revolutionaries decided to utilize the opportunity to wage a war and liberate the country. Indian supporters of the British war efforts failed to see that the imperialist power were fighting precisely to safeguard their own colonies and markets. Worldwide, the Allied powers to rally the colonies to their side during the war had promised them an era of democracy and self-determination after the war. During the war, both sides had launched vi- vicious propaganda to mailing and expose each other's uncivilized colonial record. But after the war, soon it became clear from the Paris Peace Conference and other peace treaties that imperialist power had no intention of losing their hold over the colonies. In fact, they went on divide the colonies of vanquished power among themselves. India in World War I. 1.3 million Indian soldiers served under the British Army in the Great War. That time, the population of India was around 250 million. Today India have 1.3 million soldiers with 1.3 billion populations. Year 1914, active soldiers 13 lakhs, population of India 25 crores, the percentage of soldiers 0.5%. Active 2018 active soldiers 13 lakhs, population of India 130 crores, percent of soldiers 0.1%. Served in France, Belgium, East Africa, Egypt, Gallipoli, Mesopotamia, Palestine, Sinai campaigns. 74,187 Indian soldiers laid down their lives for the British Empire. 69,214 Indian soldiers wounded. Indian soldiers were among first who suffered the horror of European trenches. India provided 100 billion British pound as war aid to the British Empire. 37 lakh tons of supplies were provided by India to British, which included clothes, weapons, and sandbags. India also provided 1.7 lakhs horses. After the war, after World War I ended, in return, what British government did, built India Gate, New Delhi War Memorial. War Memorial for Indian soldiers who fought in World War I and Third Anglo-Afghan War. In 1971, India government established Amar Jawan Jyoti after Bangladesh Liberation War. Now, Government of India is planning to build a National War Memorial and Museum near India Gate, New Delhi. British government did not give India its promised self-rule. Instead, British government imposed Rowlatt Act in 1919. Demerits. 1909, the Act offered no political solution to the problems demand for Swaraj. The separate electorate issue was a major problem as other communities like Sikh and Anglo-Indians also started demanding the same. The principle of separate electorate ultimately led to the widening of communal problem. Non-official majority was nullified by keeping few nominated members in the non-official category. Delhi Darbar, 12 December 1911, in the honor of the King George V and Queen Mary becoming new monarch. Only Darbar where the British monarch actually attended. Important Darbars: 1858 Allahabad, Queen Victoria Proclamation, Lord Canning. 1877 Delhi Darbar, Queen Victoria, Queen Empress of India given a title Kesari Hind, Lord Lytton. 1903 Delhi Darbar, King Edward VII and Queen Alexandra new monarch Lord Curzon chilo. 1911 Delhi Darbar, King George V and Queen Mary actually attended. Lord Hardinge made annulment of partition of Bengal but new divisions based on language. Shifting of capital from Calcutta to Delhi done on 12 December 1912. Shimla was a summer capital since 1863. তারপর আসছে লর্ড হার্ডিঞ্জ 2, 1910 থেকে 1916. ইম্পর্টেন্ট ইভেন্টস কী কী হয়েছিল ডিউরিং হিজ টার্মস: ট্রান্সফার অফ ক্যাপিটাল ফ্রম ক্যালকাটা টু দিল্লি 1911, করোনেশন দরবার অফ কিং জর্জ V held in Delhi 1911, annulment of Bengal partition, establishment of Hindu Mahasabha 1915 by Madan Mohan Malviya and other. In 1916, Lord Hardinge laid the foundation of the Banaras Hindu University. Madan Mohan Malviya was the founder chancellor of this university. Annie Besant had established Central Hindu College, which got converted to BHU, Banaras Hindu University. তারপর লর্ড হার্ডিঞ্জ বোম্বিং কেস, দিল্লি কনস্পিরেসি ট্রায়াল যেটাকে বলছে 23rd December 1912. Viceroy was entering the new capital of Delhi in a procession from Chandni Chowk to New Delhi. A bomb was thrown on his carriage, but he missed the mark. Viceroy escaped unhurt. Sachindranath Sanyal and Rasbihari Bose escaped. It silenced the press. Political activities were detained without trial. Allowed unwarranted arrest on the suspicion of the treason. British did recognize efforts of some soldiers. Usman Khan of the 57th Rifle, first Indian to receive a decoration during World War at Western Front. Khudat Khan received Victoria Cross in 1940 for continuing to fight despite being wounded. তারপর আসছে হোম রুল লীগ মুভমেন্ট. দ্য হোম রুল লীগ ওয়াজ দ্য ইন্ডিয়ান রেসপন্স টু দ্য ফার্স্ট ওয়ার্ল্ড ওয়ার. Was organized on the lines of the Irish Home Rule League, which represented the emergence of new trend of aggressive politics. Annie Besant, the Irish theosophist, had decided of a movement for the Home Rule on the lines of the Irish Home Rule Leagues. Tilak was ready to assume leadership after his release in 1914 and reassured government of his loyalty and to the moderates that he, like the Irish home rulers, wanted a reform of the administration and not the overthrow of the British government in India. The Home Rule League mainly aimed at getting self-government for India within British Empire, formation of linguistic-based states, education in the vernacular languages. By September 1915, Annie Besant had launched a campaign to demand self-government for India after the war, on the lines of white colonies, Australia, South Africa and Canada. Two Home Rule Leagues were established by, not simultaneously, by Bal Gangadhar Tilak at Pune in April 1916 and Annie Besant at Madras in September 1916. Tilak's movement concentrated on Maharashtra, Karnataka, central provinces and Berar. Annie Besant's movement covered on the rest of the India. Newspaper কি ছিল? Maratha and Kesari Bal Gangadhar Tilak আর নিউ ইন্ডিয়া অ্যান্ড কমনওয়েলথটা হচ্ছে অ্যানি বেসান্ত. নোট: 1905 London, Shyamji Krishna Verma, Bikaji Kama set up an Indian Home Rule Society in London, but it had nothing to do with the Home Rule League as it collapsed by 1910. 1917 London. Lala Lajpat Rai started Indian Home Rule League of America in New York. It coordinated with the Home Rule League of India. His publication in New York was Young India. Gandhi also published Young India in India, which is more important. The two leagues cooperated with each other as well as with the INC and the Muslim League in putting their demand for home rule. Home rule movement had brought a new life in the national movement, revival of Swadeshi movement. With women joining in large numbers, it works round the year, unlike INC, which only led 3 days in a 3 days meeting in a year. Unlike INC, which only held 3 days meeting in a year. It would hold general meeting in every town and village and would take out peaceful rallies, publish newspaper where they briefed about home rule. Who didn't join this movement? Anglo-Indians, most of the Muslims. Jinnah was a core leader of the league though. Non-Brahmins from the south, they felt all home rule would mean a rule of the Hindu majority, mainly the higher caste Hindus. Government measure against the home rule movement. The government came down with a severe repression, especially in Madras, where the students were prohibited from attending political meetings. Tilak was barred from entering in Punjab and Delhi. In 1917, Annie Besant and her associates were arrested, which invited nationwide protest. Jeev Subramania Iyer renounced his knighthood. Finally, government decided to placate the nationalists by declaring its intention to grant self-government to Indians as contained in Montague's August 1917 declaration. Montagu promised the gradual development of self-governing institution in India, a responsible government. This August declaration led to the end of the Home Rule movement. Tilak and Besant's effort in the moderate extremist reunion at Lucknow 1916 revived the Congress as an effective instrument of the Indian nationalism. The Lucknow Pact of 1916. It was the result of the Home Rule movement of Tilak and Annie Besant. INC factions got united. Moderate plus extremism. United. INC President Ambika Charan Majumdar. An understanding for joint action against British was reached between the Congress and Muslim League, and it was called the Lucknow Pact. Marked an important step in the Hindu-Muslim unity. INC accepted separate electorates 1909 of the Muslim for the first time. Muslim got resentful of the British due to 1911 annulment of partition of Bengal on the basis of religion, denial of Aligarh University as umbrella university, Turkey defeat in World War I. Ottoman sultans were the Khalifa of Muslims all over the world, so they got anxious for their Khalifa.